Okay, there we go. First time using my camera on my new laptop and everything, so you guys are gonna have to bear with me because I'm still looking at stuff. So my last vlog was, God, I think, I'm not even sure, to be honest with you. I think it was back in like June of maybe last year. Yeah, so a lot of stuff has happened since then. I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know how to talk about this stuff with you guys yet, face to face. I know a lot of you haven't actually gotten a chance to see me or talk with me, like this since Alex passed away. Yeah, it's, yesterday, or 2 days ago now, was 2 months since Alex passed. It's still hard to describe. It's like it happened a long time ago, but every time I think about it, it's like it happened yesterday. Kind of a deal. It's really hard for me still to wrap my brain around how much things have changed. You're going to have to bear with me here, and I'm so sorry, because I'm going to cry a lot, and I know I'm going to. And I'm going to screw with my hair, because I do that when I'm nervous, and other stuff. And it's not that I'm nervous, it's that I'm, I don't like dealing with my emotions that much. I'm sure you guys know that. But anyway, the gravity of how much things have changed, I don't know if anybody really, most of my friends on Facebook and everything have followed along with me since the day that Alex passed. And, there's quite a few of you that have checked in almost every day, or at least every week. People that have messaged me trying to keep my mind off of what's been going on. Just trying to make sure that I'm staying as stable as humanly possible. I can tell you right now that the outward appearance of my stability is smoke and mirrors. As my mom pointed out the other day, nobody sees me behind closed doors and when the lights all get shut off at night. So let me kind of run through what happened. So we got kicked out of, I shouldn't say that. We did not get kicked out of our apartment. Let me backtrack a little bit. Alex got sick, really sick, in June of this year. Now, he'd been fighting congestive heart failure, cardiomyopathy, cardiomegaly, AFib, VFib, and a slew of other things for years. Not a whole lot of people were aware. Close family and friends, of course, were. Alex would speak to it occasionally, but he really didn't like to worry people. And there, actually, for a really long time, he was really super stable. When we got married 5 years ago, he was doing great. He was stable on his medications, and, nothing too major was going on. In December of 13, I think it was, I got my car stuck in a snowbank. Our car stuck in a snowbank. And he was helping our neighbors actually push the car out of the snowbank. And I looked up, and he had grabbed his chest, and he was pale white, and he was sweating. And it was like negative 10 degrees outside or something like that at that point. There was no reason he should have been sweating. He told me he was fine. We went to the grocery store, and as soon as we walked through the door, I realized things were not good. I thought he was having a heart attack. So, thankfully, in Juneau, getting an ambulance at that point, actually, I believe the ambulances were not coming and getting people because of how bad the snowstorm was. So, I had to drive him to the hospital. I had to stop multiple times to knock the ice off of our windshield wipers. We got to the hospital, and Alex's ejection fraction, if you don't know what that is, it's the amount of, I believe, Shannon could probably explain this better than me, it's the amount of blood that is being able to be pumped out of your heart into the rest of your body. So, his heart was pumping at 10% output. at that point. He was barely able to walk very far. He wasn't able to stand up for long periods of time. It was just a very difficult time. And the cardiologist that he was going to be seeing had to fly up from Seattle, and they were only there once every 6 months. They were locum. Now, if you guys read my blog, you know this stuff. I'm not going to go into great detail. We left Juneau and we came down to Seattle. A lot of our friends and family did not know the main reason that we were coming down to Seattle was that so we were closer to doctors and emergency facilities if we needed them, because he was really bad when we left Juneau. I think the friends who came over to help us move when we left Juneau could probably tell you Alex spent the majority of that last day on the floor. He kept trying to help with things, and I kept telling him no because it was just too overwhelmingly difficult. And it was really difficult to watch him like that. When I talked about my dad before, about watching a family member pass from cancer and kind of watching their strength wane, with Alex it was mental strength along with physical strength. And anybody who knows Alex knows that knew that he was his mind was one of his greatest prizes, one of his greatest treasures. So when that whole thing happened and we decided to move to Seattle, we thought everything was going to be okay. He actually did start getting better. But then he got pneumonia in December of 2014, and we didn't have health insurance at the time. So he refused to go to the doctor without us being on health insurance. And what of course ensued was him being sick with pneumonia for a month. And by the time our health insurance kicked in, and I fought so hard with him to get him to go. And I know I shouldn't have to. I feel like I need to defend myself a lot right now. I pushed really hard to try to get him to at least go to urgent care or something like that. And he wouldn't do it because of the money situation. I was the only one working. He wasn't able to at the time yet. And I'd taken almost quite a bit of a pay cut to move down to Seattle because, that's what we needed at the time. The money didn't mean shit to me. And, still doesn't. I mean, as long as we were comfortable and we were living, then it really didn't make a big difference to me. So we finally get into the doctor. His lungs lit up like Christmas trees. And what I mean by that is that they did the x-ray and you could just see splotches of white popping up in his lungs. And then it became very obvious at that particular doctor's appointment that his heart had enlarged even further. His ejection fraction had continued to worsen. And then he started putting on water. So he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He was having panic attacks. It was awful. And they got that fixed, but then the water became a really big problem. His diuretics stopped working the way they were supposed to. So in February of 2015, they admitted him to Northwest Hospital in Seattle. He lost 80 pounds of water in 1 week. He was on IV diuretics. So it was 80 milligrams, whatever, of Lasix every couple of hours. So he would get 4 shots of that in a day. And that resulted in him losing 80 pounds of water. And he did okay for a little while. Fast forward, I guess, to January of 2016. He'd started putting on water again, but not quite as badly. I mean, it was a slow crawl. You could tell it was happening, but it wasn't like, oh my God, all up in your face like it had been before. And we came home from Costco in January of this year, of 16. And we'd been bickering back and forth. Now, if you knew anything about Alex and I, we did not fight. We bickered. We acted like we'd been married for 50 years and we'd been married for 5, for 4.5 at that time. Alex and I always kind of meshed up that way. It was, I guess the old soul thing, I suppose. But we got home, and he wasn't feeling well. And he sat down on the couch, and I turned around for a couple of seconds to put something away in the refrigerator, and I heard what sounded like loud snoring. Just or like somebody trying to push a cough out, just really loudly. And I turned around, and his head was lolled back into the couch, and his eyes were fluttering, and his arms had curled up, and he was just kind of rocking, making this noise. And I thought he was trying to push a cough out. I didn't know what was going on. So I went, "What are you doing?" And as soon as I talked to him, he snapped out of it. And what became very, very evident was that he'd had a seizure. He'd had something somewhat similar, like the August before, like August 15. He'd had a very, it lasted 5 seconds, something like that. Neither one of us thought anything of it. This one lasted at least 30, 15, 30, some of that general vicinity. And you know me, I worked with kids and adults who had seizures, so I was pretty decently sure that's what it was. That one subsided. He said he felt okay, that, it may have just been a fluke. He laid down across the couch with his head on my lap and fell asleep, and I was just playing with his hair and trying to make sure he was calm and that he was rested. Or that he was resting, I should say, because I was freaked out by that point. And me rubbing at my face and rubbing at everything else, it's a fidget that I have when I'm upset and I'm trying to keep myself solid. So, if you see me doing like this shit and all that, I'm not on crack, I promise. It's just something I do as a coping mechanism, I guess. Anyway, so he sat up at some point and he said that he was feeling like another one was going to hit. And this is the same night. And I'm like, okay. And another one didn't hit, but he got really lightheaded and his heart was acting odd. And he looked at me and he goes, "Now call somebody." And the history of my, by that point, Alex and I had been together for 7 years. Never had he asked me to call 911. Even when it was at the worst when we were in Juneau, he never asked me to call 911 and get an ambulance to the house. At this point, he did. So I called, and my training as an ambulance chaser came in handy. So the ambulance came and got him, and I followed the whole way to the hospital to Northwest. They ran a whole bunch of tests, couldn't find anything. It was just what it was, I guess. I mean, they said that they couldn't rule out that it was a seizure. They couldn't rule out that it was a cardiac emergency. There was just nothing they could really figure out. His enzymes were up. His cardiac enzymes were up, but they didn't have a baseline. So fast forward to, I guess probably April and May, when I flew out to Ohio here for my mom's graduation. I was gone for 2 days, and I was terrified the entire time that we were going to come back and he would have been gone. The water came on so incredibly fast. He got a pneumonia twice in March and then again in April, and they were just awful. Both of us got it, and by the time June rolled around, he got a really bad infection in his leg. His leg was bright red. I mean, beet red. I mean, it was hot. He was uncomfortable. By this point, he had so much water on him that if I'd stuck him with a pin, he wouldn't bleed. He would leak. He had open sores. Well, not sores, but blisters, I guess, down his legs that were seeping. So he would just leak water. And he was on blood thinners. He should have bled, but he never did. It was just water. I mean, it was just every surface of his body from his chest line down was water. And he got the infection, and I'd finally had enough. So I took him to the ER at Northwest, and he'd had a terrible experience there when he was in the hospital the first time. And he didn't want to stay. So we asked his primary care physician where else we could take him, because they put him on antibiotics for his leg, but they said that really the main thing was the water. They wanted to get that taken off. So we talked to the primary, and they said to take him to University of Washington, University of Washington has the best reputation for a hospital in the entirety of the Pacific Northwest. They're a very dedicated medical system and a very dedicated hospital. So June 9th, I took him into the hospital, and he walked in. I mean, the thing with Alex was that he had, at that point, 120 pounds of water on his body. And he wasn't doing very well, but he walked into that emergency room. I mean, he had a walking stick, but he walked in. That was the determination he had. I think in a lot of ways he thought if he could stand up and walk it, he'd be fine. Now, mind you, up till this point, neither one of us had acknowledged what was going on. I had expressed to family, very close family, that I was scared. That he wasn't going to make it through the rest of the year if they didn't figure out something, if they didn't figure out what else to do. But I hadn't said anything to him because I figured I wanted to be strong for him. And so we walked into the hospital. They said that he was the worst case of anasarca, which is all over body edema that they had ever seen. And people with even half of the amount of water he had on him generally come in on oxygen in a hospital bed, not walking in on their own. He was so proud of that. He would look at me and go, "See, I told you, walking on my own steam, and they have no idea what to do with you." They admitted him to the hospital that night. They said they weren't so worried about the infection in his leg. They thought that the edema was more important because his heart was struggling so much. And actually, his ejection fraction at that point had come back up. It was at 22%, I think, at that point. So they put him in the hospital. He got admitted the morning of our 5th wedding anniversary, June 10th. I will not go into graphic detail. He was in the hospital for a month. What had taken a week a year before took close to 4 this time around. And he was on massive doses of medicines that were 7 to 10 times more potent than the medicines they had used before, and it still wasn't working. Fast forward to when we went to Olympia to find an apartment, which was the weekend before he'd passed away. Yeah, we'd come home Saturday afternoon. Sunday morning, I woke up. He was really tired. We did breakfast. We did a couple other different things, and he said he was tired, so I put him in bed. I mean, I walked with him, made sure he was comfortable. I helped shift his legs up into position, made sure he had blankets and he was comfortable, and as I'm pulling his shirt up, I realized, I saw this bruise about this big on his stomach, which was really odd. Now, he was on warfarin, so any type of bruising that seems out of the ordinary, you really need to take notice of. And I said something about it, and he kind of looks at me, and I suppose I should backtrack a little bit. He had a doctor's appointment the week before. And as we're coming into the hospital, he'd made a comment about, he asked me if I'd been taking my vitamins and stuff in the morning, because I sometimes struggle with maintaining my own medication compliance. And not like they're medicines, it's just, things to keep me healthy. And I said, yeah, I put them next to the bed so that I can take them when I get them every morning. And he's in a wheelchair, and I'm pushing the wheelchair, and we're going into the front doors of the hospital. And he went, "Good, because you're going to need to be healthy when you go back east." And I stopped, and I came around the front, and I went, what am I going back east for? And my husband, who was the strongest person I had ever met in my life, ever, was crying. Full-blown crying. And I ducked down and I asked him what was wrong, and he just looks at me and goes, I'm gonna die. Shortly before that conversation, he and I had finally acknowledged to each other that we knew something was really wrong, that if the doctors weren't able to figure out what was going on, that things were going to get worse very quickly. But that was the first time he'd ever thrown the D word out. I had said it several days prior. And he's wiping at his face with his jacket. And I just said, not today. You know, you pull from Game of Thrones, which just seems so stupid. But I knew it was something that he could resonate with, and that I could resonate with, because I was terrified. For the last couple months of his life, every time I would leave the house because I do home visits for work, every time I would leave, I would be afraid that I was going to come back and he'd be gone. And, so I told him, not today. We're going to get through this right now. I need you to suck it up, because, you know, we're getting ready to head into this doctor's appointment. We need to make sure that they know we're scared, that we need to make sure that we're upfront about everything that we're doing and everything he was doing, to get better. And we went in and they gave him a hard time. They always did. And he looks at the doctor and he goes, look, I don't want to die. I'm not trying to do anything to make it so that I will. He goes, I don't want to leave her. And he was trying to explain to them that, you know, even if, you know, he was fully committed to getting better, which he was. I mean, he fought hard. Very hard. And that Sunday, when I noticed the bruise, he went to sleep, I went to sleep. We took a nap for like 3 hours. It was the first time he and I had actually been able to sleep in bed next to each other in several weeks. And aside from being in the hotel that weekend before, and just having that closeness was something he and I hadn't been able to have in a while. So I woke up, and I went over to his side of the bed. He was still asleep. And the bruise had gone from the size of a $50 to the size of a football. And I said, that's it. And I took him to the emergency room, and I was fully expecting that they were going to admit him to the hospital that day. And because I thought, this is it. Something's up. I didn't know what it was. I had no real inkling of what was going on. I just knew that it was a bruise. I thought maybe he was bleeding internally. You know, I was scared. So we get to the ER. They said it was cellulitis. Put him on doxycycline and sent him home. Thursday, he declined really quickly over the course of the beginning of that week. He had a doctor's appointment on Monday right after, and I had asked him to please show the doctor the bruising on his stomach, because it had expanded all the way down underneath his stomach and then all the way around to his back, which I knew wasn't normal. And he told me there wasn't any point because he was already on antibiotics, and he goes, and look, I don't even have my cough anymore. I'm like, well, that must mean you had an infection somewhere. Tuesday and Wednesday were hard. We both thought we got a flu. We were in the process of trying to get ready to move. We almost had the apartment in Olympia completely solidified. I was working really hard on that. And, but we both had headaches, and we both just felt miserable. I don't know what was going on with me. I don't know if but I think I may have caught a flu, but for Alex, it was, I I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but I woke up Thursday morning and I walked into the living room and he was pale as a sheet and he was barely able to stand up. He was waking me up every couple of hours to help with getting to the bathroom because he couldn't stand on his own. And he sounded different. He was behaving differently. It's just, I knew something was wrong. He thought he just had the flu. I thought it was something else. I fought him tooth and nail that day to try to get him into the hospital because I thought something. And he wouldn't listen to me. In true Alex fashion, he wouldn't listen to me. Finally, he was in so much pain that he finally called his doctor and told him what was going on, and they told us to come in. So at 2 o'clock that afternoon, I took him to the ER. By that point, he could not stand on his own. He was so weak. And I took him to the restroom right before we left, and he just wrapped his arms around my torso and just held on to me for a little while because, and I'm holding his head, and I was kissing on him and trying to comfort him as much as I could because he was just so, I don't know, I didn't even know how to describe it, but I got him up. He said that was impressive because I transferred him up. Now, I was a caregiver. I know about transfers. I know about careful, appropriate transfers. So I put my arms underneath him, locked my hands, and just rocked his body up into mine to stand him up. And he goes, I didn't even know you could do that. And I'm like, oh, I guess there's a lot of things I can do that you don't know I can do. We had probably one of the weirdest and hardest conversations we'd ever had at that point. I had made a comment several weeks before that I felt like I failed him. Because I was watching him get worse and worse and there wasn't anything I could do. And, if you've ever lost a loved one, you know that in those last couple of weeks, in those last couple, when you don't even know it's coming, that powerless feeling is one of the worst things in the world. And I, of course, because I do that all the time anyway, I internalized it. And I just felt like, in the one moment where he really needed me, I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. So he brought it up again right before we went to the hospital, that he didn't want me to feel like I'd ever failed him. And I have this problem with, if somebody's trying to validate the fact that I've done a decent job at something, I will try to throw it down a peg or two. So I said, I know one thing I failed at. And he goes, what? And I went, I couldn't give you children. And we tried. A lot of our family and friends didn't know that, but Alex and I had lost 3 pregnancies over the course of our marriage in varying stages. My body just wasn't able to do it. And our last one, we lost the October after my dad had died. And actually the baby was due right around Alex's birthday, right around our anniversary, his 40th birthday. And I kind of just gave up. And by that point, Alex was starting to get sick, and things just kind of snowballed, and it just never happened. It just wasn't in the cards, but it still made me feel awful, because I knew when Alex and I got together, one of the things I knew with all my heart was that he would have made an amazing dad. And I wanted that experience. I mean, I think that's a very selfish thing too, but I wanted that experience with him. And he looks at me and he goes, well, when I get better, we'll try again. I have resources with work now, or we can do IVF. We have all this other stuff. We can do it again. And that was the last, like, real coherent conversation we'd had. And I got him into the car. I walked him out to the car. He didn't want to take the ambulance because the ambulances in Shoreline aren't that great. So I transferred him out to the car. And I got him in, and I got him, blankets all around him because he was having a hard time maintaining his body temperature. So I had him all blanketed up and took him to the hospital. And one of the last things he said to me was, well, at least I'll be out of your way so you can pack. Because we had just found out that morning that the apartment in Olympia was a go. We got completely approved. We got to the hospital and he was in so much pain. And his blood pressure I got the paperwork now, so I know exactly what happened. But his blood pressure when we got there was 77/58. His blood sugar was dropping. They had diagnosed him with cardiogenic and septic shock within an hour of being in the hospital, and didn't say anything to either one of us about it. He was in full kidney failure by that point. He was in full liver failure by that point. And he was just slowly becoming weaker and weaker. Not even slowly by that point. It was very quick. And they just said it was normal. They just said it was because his blood pressure was so low. They didn't tell me anything. But I now have the paperwork stating that they had diagnosed him with the shock shortly before or after we had gotten to the ER. And we were there for 5 hours with no one telling me how sick he was, and I had no clue. And I feel like an idiot for that because I trained on those things. But I think the overwhelmingness of the situation kind of prevented me from seeing what it was. They came in and gave him morphine because he was in just so much pain, and he was begging for pain medication. He looked at me, he goes, just help me to get them to give me pain meds. And I told him his blood pressure was so low that if they gave him pain meds, he probably wouldn't, it was going to drop his blood pressure even lower. And we didn't need that. And he had his CPAP on because that was a comforting thing for him and everything. And finally they came in and gave him the morphine. And he fell asleep, and I've never been so scared and relieved at the same time, because I knew that his blood pressure wasn't high enough for him to be getting pain medication, but at the same time, he was suffering. I had walked, at one point they had transferred us out of the first room we were in because it was too small, and transferred us into a bigger room in the ER, because I needed more room to work with him. And I walked into the hallway with the doctor, and I started crying, and I had my arms across my chest, and I had my head in my hands, and Alex couldn't see me, and she just goes, he's going to be okay, and I'm like, you don't understand. This is the worst I have ever seen him, and Alex and I, by that point, had been through a lot with him physically. I do not remember if it was 10:30 or 11:30. I really don't. They came in, and they said they were going to transfer him up to the cardiac ICU, and I remember this, they said that because they did not have a regular room on the cardiac ward to put him in, they only had an ICU room. And part of me, thinking back on that, should have known that they don't just randomly put somebody in an ICU. But I ran with it. That's what they told me. So they got him all situated, and I followed that bed all the way upstairs. I had his bags of stuff and his walking stick and his glasses and, everything for him I had on me physically. And I never took my eyes off of him. Because part of me felt like I was never going to see him again if I didn't stay there. If I wasn't right there on him. But we got into the ICU and they said they were going to be harassing him for about a half an hour, just getting him into bed and getting him all situated, and told me to go wait in the waiting room. Now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit because almost everybody knows how this situation turned up. He punched 3 people. He ripped out his arterial line. He was what they refer to as obtunded in his medical file. He was in a coma when he got up to the ICU, or he fell into a coma shortly thereafter. I had been laughing coming upstairs a little bit because I thought he was just high. They had given him a lot of morphine. He was talking about seeds we hadn't brought to the hospital, all this other shit. Turned out what was actually happening was his blood pressure was tanking. His blood sugar was tanking, and within 10 minutes of being in the ICU, after they kicked me out of the room, he went into a coma. They gave him epinephrine and dextrose. Got his blood pressure up, and then his blood sugar went from 45 to 150 in a 11-minute time frame. And when he came out of that coma, he came out violently. They brought me in an hour and a half later to calm him down. And I did. And I stayed there with him until 1:30 in the morning. They told me he was stable. They told me he was okay. And he'd been talking to me. And I told him I needed to come home. I needed to get some sleep because I had work in the morning. And I had stuff to work on for the apartment that I had to get in. And he just whipped his head at me and he goes, okay. And he told me to go home. I told him I'd stay if he wanted me to, and he told me not to, that he was okay. And I told him I loved him, and he told me he loved me too. Then I left. And I remember distinctly walking out of that room with this really heavy feeling like something really bad was coming. Sorry. And, they called me at 5:15. She'd called me one time before. It wasn't anything major, just he was stable. They were getting ready to put in a central line. Blah, blah. He's fine. Okay. So, 5:15 they call. And, I'm never gonna forget it. She said, are you home alone? I said, yes. She goes, do you have anybody who can drive you to the hospital right now? And I said, no. Why? Then the only thing she said was, okay, well, we're code bluing Alex right now. I knew what that meant. A code blue is when someone goes into cardiac arrest. So they told me to get to the hospital as fast as I could. They'd been doing CPR for a little bit by that point already. I don't remember much of the drive to the hospital. I know it didn't take me long. We lived 20 minutes from the hospital. I got there in 10. They called me about 5 minutes out and told me that there would be a security guard at the emergency room entrance to escort me upstairs, to just leave. He would valet my car and to just follow them upstairs. And I knew right then what I was getting ready to walk into. I didn't want to acknowledge it to myself, but I knew. They were afraid I was going to flip out. I think. I mean, I don't know for sure, but... So I handed him the keys after I parked. then I just raced up there. I mean, I was flying down that hallway trying to get to Alex because I thought maybe something had changed, maybe he was okay. And every time I close my eyes, no matter what I do, the image of what happened next is permanently burned into my brain. I walked in and the doctor put her arm across the nurse, put her arm across my chest. And they wouldn't let me in the room. There were a solid 30 to 40 nurses, doctors, orderlies, all in gowns, all in face masks, everything in the room. And all I saw when I walked in, when I got to the door, was just this tiny little nurse. She couldn't have been more than 100 pounds soaking wet, doing CPR as hard as she could on Alex's chest. She was just pounding on him, trying to get him to wake up. Or at least so I thought. The only reason they had continued CPR is because I had asked them to keep going until I got there, because by some miracle, and they kept trying to keep me out of the room, and I kept trying to push past her, and the last thing I heard the nurse say was, "We intubated him, I just want you to be prepared for that." And I walked in, and his eyes were wide open, and his pupils were blown, and his skin was already a different color. And I don't remember anything for the next 10 minutes. I screamed. The only thing I heard before I went under was me saying his name and screaming. And then I woke up 10 minutes later holding his hand, screaming. And they had the cop on me the whole time. I thought that was really weird. They had the security guard on me the entire time. I was somehow or another sitting in a chair next to him. And they had stopped CPR. The breathing tube was still going. And I asked them to turn off the breathing machine because I couldn't handle seeing him breathing when I knew he wasn't there and his eyes were still open. And so I asked her to turn the machine off, then to close his eyes. And that was it. And they told me I could stay with him as long as I wanted to, but I stayed for maybe 15 minutes after that because I knew if I'd stayed any longer, I wasn't going to make it home. I didn't want to make it home anyway, and I think that's part of why they kept the cop on me too. But I went very calm. I remember taking a deep breath, and the tears stopped, and the overwhelmness stopped, and everything just went numb. And I walked out of that room with them asking me if I had anybody who could come and get me, if I had people they wanted me to call, or if they sign this, do this, get in touch with us, let us know what we need to do as far as his last wishes. Do you want an autopsy? All those kinds of things. It was a blur. I mean, it was, yes, I want an autopsy. I have no idea where to do his cremation. I'll get back to you guys. How long do I have to do that? I had everything set up within an hour of me making it home. No, 2 hours. Because everything opened at like 8 o'clock, and he passed away right before 6. And I left the hospital half an hour after he passed away. And, of course I moved to Ohio, because I needed to be with my family. I mean, after we'd done his burial at sea, walking around our home with all of those reminders of him, I can't even describe how hard that was. Sitting at the other end of the couch, hoping that if I held my eyes closed long enough that it would have been a dream and I would have woken up. And the nightmare would have been over, but of course it wasn't. And, so now I'm here, and, I'm getting ready to buy this condo. And, I tried really hard for him. I fought really hard. And I loved him so much. I don't know what else to say. Alex was very brave. And he was very strong. But, no matter what happened, his body just couldn't fight anymore. I mean, he'd been through so much, and, of course, the thing for me right now is trying not to be selfish, because, he would have suffered so badly, and he lived, and he was already suffering so badly, and there isn't an ounce of me that wanted to keep him in that. I'm really some days are better than others, but none of them are good. Some of them just suck a little bit less than the other ones. I'm trying really hard to keep a brave face, and I know Alex would have wanted me to be strong and go on and have a good life, and I don't know how to do that. Once the numbness wore off, the enormity of how badly things fell apart finally hit me. It's like I feel like I was too happy or something, maybe. This is punishment for something. And I know it's not, but I can't stop thinking about what else maybe we could have done, and there just isn't anything. I know I have a tendency to beat myself over the head about these kinds of things, and I'm trying really hard not to, because he would have killed me. I mean, if there's one thing that I do know for sure, is that he knew how much I loved him, and I knew how much he loved me, and I know not everybody gets that, and I understand that we were really lucky. I just wish there was more I could have done, more I could have been for him, because he deserved better. There'll be more of this shit. I know there's gonna be more of this shit. Bear with me, guys, okay? I'm, outwardly, when I'm posting on Facebook and I'm doing all these things, I'm sure it looks like I'm okay. And I'm kind of hoping to trick myself into thinking that, or into being at some point. But for right now, just know that I love you all very much. That, the outpouring of love and support from the day that Alex passed was and continues to be overwhelming, in a very good way. There wasn't a person in my circle and outside of my circle, people I didn't even know, people that were friends of Alex's who I have since made connections with, that rallied behind me instantaneously. And I will be forever grateful for that, because when my world was falling apart, you guys were holding the pieces in place long enough for me to do what I needed to do, and still are in a lot of instances. That's why I stopped. I will never post one of those, if you're my friend, say something on this thing that's so stupid to do on Facebook. You know who your friends are. It's true, in the worst moments of your life, that's when you find out how loved you are and who cares about you and who doesn't. Yeah. Thank you for all of the support that you gave me and for Alex when he was alive. It's been amazing. And I will be forever grateful. And I know I don't voice those things very well or very often, but, you guys are awesome, and, I'm sorry for the tears I'm sure that will be shed over watching this video, but, I will keep you posted as this journey continues, and as I try to kind of rebuild and refigure out who I am now, or how to go from here, because I have no clue. So I guess we'll all be surprised. Anyway, it's been almost an hour of me babbling, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. But again, I love you all very much, and thank you, and if I could give you all hugs, I would do it. But just know that it's in my thoughts, and you're all in my thoughts, and thank you. Just stay tuned, check my blog, I guess, and check for more of these videos. There'll be more. Good night.